class, I felt like it was time for another video. So this week is week 12, and you are doing part 2 of your research plan assignment. So that really is looking at phase 1 of the research plan assignment. So the information you'll need is really to look at Follett and Beck, especially Chapter 3, Major Steps in Quantitative Study, the Building Blocks of Research, and the Conceptual and Operational Definitions, and Chapter 6, Developing a Research Framework. So these readings were assigned to you, but just pointing out that this is, you had many readings. These are ones that can be very helpful specifically for this assignment. So in phase 1, you will be formulating and delimiting the problem, reviewing the related literature, undertaking clinical fieldwork, defining frameworks, and developing conceptual definitions, and formulating a hypothesis. So this is what Follett and Beck says that you should do in phase 1. So in our, with our research plan, what you were given was the NHANES database. So we are going to take this phase 1 and kind of tailor it to what we need for this assignment. So the first step in looking at the problem is to look at the NHANES data set. So we did this last week. You looked at the variables and named what their levels of measurements were, and you looked at the demographics of the sample. So this gave you some clear ideas on who was in the sample and the information that was available. So with this information, you can think about a research question that you can pose. So if we go into our data here, we see that all of these variables here, this is what we have information about: the age, and if we looked at the demographics, we saw this was an older adult population. So really we can only ask research questions about older adults, right? We know that we have information about their race, body mass index, so on and so on. Their blood pressure. I believe these questions here, from 12 down, are all part of one depression measurement tool. So we have the individual reports of each of these, so we can ask questions about those separated out. And we have information about their A1C. So we have all this information here. And so based on this, what kind of questions can we ask? So we don't want to ask questions about demographics. We want to ask questions that have a clear rationale for why we were asking these questions. You don't want to just ask, is systolic blood pressure related to diastolic blood pressure, right? Or you don't want to ask, is moving or speaking slowly related to body mass index? I guess you could ask that, but so better examples: poor appetite or overeating related to ethnicity. This is why is this kind of a silly question, or why are these silly questions? Really because they aren't based on some research that's been done in the past that has been giving us some knowledge about the relationships that exist, that are suspected or known out there in the biomedical literature that we have. So you can pose a question, but then really the next step that Follett and Beck says is to review the related literature and see if it makes sense that you would ask these questions. And this making sense, this rationale, this is what I'm referring to as a framework for this week. I want there to be some kind of plausible explanation of why you are comparing two variables, or two or more variables. So what I did, I had this example question: do people with depression gain weight more than those without depression? So I went to the Google and I just typed in, is depression related to weight gain? And up popped this study. It's a meta-analysis, which we know is high quality evidence, called Does Depression Cause Obesity? Bam. So then in here I see, just went to the conclusion of the study. It says the results combining data for over 33,000 subjects showed that depressed compared with non-depressed people are significantly more likely to be obese at follow-up measurements. They said this is more for female adolescents. So with this I have kind of this this idea about the relationships between variables. So gender might be a moderator of depression. So this is kind of this conceptual model that I get out of reading these different studies. So the next step, Pollitt and Beck says in their phase 1, is undertaking clinical field work. Well, for this we're not really going into a field. We're not doing a nursing intervention. We're not doing health promotion. So we're not going to go into a field and look at these items. We're just looking at the relationship between variables. So when we're thinking about, what kind of framework we would use with this, a nursing theory is based on how nurses interact with patients and how nursing interventions lead to different outcomes. And what is nursing and caring? Those are the concepts that are defined in those models. So that would not be a theory that would be applicable to this NHANES data set. We're just comparing numbers and variables. And with health promotion, we're not really talking about health promotion, although the results of us looking at these variables in this data can inform health promotion interventions. But really for this, we're looking at biomedical relationships between variables. And so when we talk about step 4, defining the framework, in chapter 6, there's a really good section there called Developing a Framework in Quantitative Studies. It says we need to have a conceptual rationale for doing what we're doing in a research study. And in this research study, we're comparing variables. So why? Tell me why you're comparing these two variables. This is what your framework is. You want to have a clear vision of the concepts that you're looking at. And so if you're going to be looking at depression, well, what is depression? How are they defining, or are you defining depression from the NHANES data? If you're saying that people who are overweight have different ethnicities, or ethnicity is related to obesity, we'll define what is obesity. What are the ethnicities that we have in this study? So you really have to know these, your variables inside and out. And then step 5, also I just want to come back to this one again. It says in chapter 6 here in Pollitt and Beck, the first step in the development of a framework then is to formulate a generalized scheme of relative concepts that is firmly grounded in them. And so again, back to, I got a meta-analysis, I have some findings here, and I kind of come up with an idea of how concepts might be related. So step number 5 in phase 1 is formulating a hypothesis. So we did this in this week's discussion. I wanted you to ask 3 questions, 2 quantitative and 1 qualitative. So the qualitative one was saying, if you had this group of people, what kind of question might you ask them? So it was kind of a tricky question. I apologize about that, but just thinking, if you have these people here, what can you ask them based on this data? So again, a qualitative study is one where you interview people, you get the narrative data. You're not going to have numbers. So you're going to interview them, and then you are going to analyze all that they say in totality. So one of the quantitative research questions I wanted you to formulate into a hypothesis. So please go into Follett and Beck in chapter 3, page 56, and right there it says how you formulate a research question and what a hypothesis looks like. So with all that in mind, I revised my original research question and have this hypothesis: overweight females will have higher depression rate than males. So I can't ask about adolescents because we only have older adults in this study. So I included some references. My battery's about dead, and I'm going to end this and get it out to you guys. I'm in the back of a moving vehicle, so hopefully the sound was okay. And please ask if any questions. Okay, bye-bye.